I was out in the Rockies, trying to capture the untouched beauty of winter. It was serene, the snow-covered landscape stretching for miles. The silence was almost deafening. As the day wore on, clouds gathered, and snow began to fall. Panic set in when the storm intensified, and visibility dwindled. I stumbled upon an old, abandoned cabin. Desperation made it look like a haven. The door creaked open, revealing a dimly lit interior. It was cold, but at least it provided some shelter. I decided to hunker down until the storm passed. I gathered some firewood, trying to warm up the place. The flickering flames cast eerie shadows on the worn-out walls. It was then that I sensed something wasn't right. The creaks and groans of the cabin seemed to echo with unseen whispers. I shook it off, attributing it to my imagination running wild. But then, I heard footsteps, soft and deliberate. My heart raced. I called out, expecting an echo, but instead, a voice replied. A low, guttural sound that sent chills down my spine. I scanned the shadows, and there he was, a man lurking in the darkness. His eyes, wild and vacant, stared at me. Fear gripped me as he stepped into the light. His clothes were ragged, and his face wore the lines of a life hardened by solitude. He muttered incomprehensible words, a language of madness. I tried to reason with him, to understand his story, but his responses were disjointed, like fragments of a shattered mind. He moved closer, his intentions unclear. I retreated, my back against the cold wall. The fire's warmth offered little comfort against the growing terror. The man's demeanor shifted abruptly, from a vacant stare to a manic grin. He brandished a rusted knife, the blade glinting ominously. It was a fight for survival. I dodged his erratic lunges, my every move calculated to avoid that menacing blade. The confines of the cabin turned the struggle into a harrowing dance. Fear fueled my instincts as I desperately sought an escape. Exhaustion set in as the night wore on. Every breath echoed with the awareness that the snowstorm raged outside, indifferent to the life or death struggle within the cabin. In a moment of desperation, I managed to break free and bolt out into the blizzard. I stumbled through the snow, driven by the primal instinct to survive. I remember that weekend up in Aspen like it was yesterday. It started off all normal, just a bunch of us friends wanting a good time at a fancy ski resort. The place was huge, all wooden and cozy. We were excited about the skiing, the hot tubs, and the whole vibe. The snowstorm hit hard, though. Real heavy. We got stuck up there, isolated from the rest of the world. It was eerie, you know? The resort turned into this quiet, snowy maze. The atmosphere changed. The warmth we felt earlier turned cold, like the snow outside. It was just the six of us, me, my girlfriend Emily, and our friends Mark, Sarah, Alex, and Mike. The staff, they were friendly at first. But soon, we started noticing something off. Whispers in the hallways, glances that lingered a bit too long. You know when you can just sense something's not right? That was it. The first night, we gathered in the lobby, telling ourselves it was just the snow playing tricks on us. But then we found a room that was unlocked, and we weren't supposed to be there. It was like an office, files, and stuff. That's when we started thinking maybe one of the staff had some sinister intentions. The resort was huge, and the snowstorm made it feel even more vast. We couldn't just leave. We were trapped. The second night, things got worse. We heard footsteps outside our rooms, slow and deliberate. It wasn't the sound of someone checking if everything's okay. It was more like someone stalking. We decided to stick together, not wander alone. It didn't take long for the atmosphere to turn thick with tension. Every creak in the wooden floors made us jump. We couldn't trust the staff anymore. We kept seeing shadows moving in the corners of our eyes. Mark found something odd in that office, a list of guests with some marked in red. It felt like a hit list. We couldn't comprehend it at first, but then we started noticing that the guests marked in red were missing. Vanished. Panic set in, and we realized we were the ones left. Emily and I couldn't sleep. We kept hearing those footsteps, sometimes even whispers. One night, we decided to explore the resort in the dark. It was a bad idea. We stumbled upon a room, a hidden space, filled with strange symbols and maps. It was like some sick game was being played with us as pawns. We confronted the staff, but they denied everything. They looked at us with blank faces, as if we were making things up. That's when the fear really gripped us, not just the fear of the unknown, but the fear of not being believed. We were on our own. As the snowstorm raged on, the situation escalated. The staff started acting more suspicious, disappearing for hours. We found more rooms that were off limits. It was like the resort had secrets buried beneath the snow. One day, we decided we had to escape. We couldn't wait for the storm to pass. We had to get out. But as we gathered our things, we realized Alex was missing. Panic set in again, and we split up to search. The hallways felt like a maze, twisting and turning into an abyss. We found Alex in that hidden room, unconscious. Symbols were drawn around him, and the air felt heavy with something dark. We woke him up, and he was disoriented, mumbling about experiments and tests. It was beyond our understanding. The staff caught us trying to leave. They cornered us, their eyes devoid of any humanity. That's when it hit us. We were the experiment, the subjects of some twisted game. The snowstorm wasn't the only thing isolating us. It was the staff, playing puppeteers with our lives. We fought, scratched, and clawed our way out. Desperation gave us strength. The storm outside seemed mild compared to the chaos inside the resort. We ran through the snow, leaving that nightmare behind. We didn't look back until we were far away, safe. We never reported it to the authorities. Fear, I guess. Fear that they wouldn't believe us, that the nightmare would follow us. But I can't forget those cold hallways, the shadows, and the feeling of being hunted. Aspen's beauty will always be tainted by the horror we lived through. It was a cold night in Lake Tahoe. I was on this solo road trip, just me and the snow-covered landscape. The car engine sputtered, and I realized I was stuck in the middle of nowhere. The snowstorm came out of nowhere, covering everything in a thick blanket of white. I sat there in the car, watching the snow fall. Panic started creeping in. I tried to call for help, but there was no signal. That's when a guy, maybe in his 40s, knocked on my window. He looked friendly enough, offering to help with my car troubles. I hesitated at first, but desperation made me roll down the window. He introduced himself as Joe, claiming he lived nearby. Said he had a tow truck and could get my car to safety. Seemed like a savior in that moment. I didn't want to freeze in my car all night, so I agreed. He helped me push the car to the side of the road, said the tow truck would be there soon. We waited in his truck. He tried making small talk, but there was something off about him. The way he looked at me, like he was sizing me up. His smile seemed forced. I chalked it up to nerves. Maybe I was just paranoid in the middle of nowhere with a stranger. The tow truck finally arrived, and we headed to a mechanic Joe knew. The whole time, he kept glancing at me. I couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong. The mechanic's place was in the outskirts, dimly lit and isolated. I hesitated, but Joe reassured me everything was fine. Inside the garage, the mechanic fixed my car. Joe insisted on waiting with me until it was done. As time passed, his friendly demeanor started to crack. He asked personal questions, things he didn't need to know. It felt invasive, and I regretted letting him help. The mechanic finished with my car, and we headed back to the tow truck. That's when Joe's tone shifted. He started talking about how lucky I was to meet him, how dangerous it is for a woman alone in these parts. I thanked him, but his words felt more like a threat than a concern. On the way back, he took a different route, away from the town. My heart raced. I asked where we were going, but he just grinned, saying it was a shortcut. The road became desolate, no other cars in sight. Fear knotted me as we drove deeper into the dark. I noticed his eyes in the rearview mirror, darting between me and the road. My mind screamed danger. I told him I could walk back to town, but he laughed it off. Said it was too far, and he was doing me a favor. My gut twisted with unease. When we finally reached a more populated area, I asked him to stop. I thanked him for his help and practically jumped out of the truck. He insisted on walking me to a nearby hotel, but I refused. I felt exposed, vulnerable. As he drove away, I watched his taillights disappear, relief flooding over me. I checked into a hotel, locked the door, and peered out the window. I couldn't shake the feeling that I narrowly escaped something sinister. The snowstorm outside mirrored the chill I felt inside. Joe's intentions, hidden beneath a facade of helpfulness, left me with a lingering fear that stayed with me long after that night in Lake Tahoe. Me and my son, Jake, decided to go on an ice fishing trip up in Alaska. It was something I used to do with my old man, and I wanted to pass it on. The frozen lake stretched for miles, surrounded by the cold, quiet wilderness. We set up our gear, drilling holes in the ice. The sun was setting, casting this eerie orange glow. That's when a group of locals showed up. They seemed friendly, cracking jokes and offering some of their catch. They were rough-looking, but they laughed and shared stories about fishing in these parts. As night fell, we invited them to sit by the fire we'd made. We thought it'd be a good time, swapping tales and enjoying the solitude. The locals, though, started getting too familiar. They asked too many questions about where we were staying, if we were alone. It made my skin crawl a bit, but I tried to brush it off. Jake was getting tired, so we decided to call it a night. The locals insisted we follow them to a better spot. I hesitated, but they seemed harmless enough. We packed up our gear, and they led us deeper into the wilderness, away from the lake. The woods got thicker, and the snow deeper. Red flags started popping up in my mind. We reached a clearing, and the locals turned hostile. They demanded our money, our gear, everything. They weren't just friendly fishermen anymore. They were predators. I tried to reason with them, but they weren't having it. They got aggressive, pulling out knives and making it clear they meant business. Panic set in, and I knew we were in deep trouble. Jake clung to me, scared out of his mind. We fought back, but it was 3 against 2, and they were ruthless. They took everything we had, leaving us stranded in the freezing wilderness. They laughed as they disappeared into the night. We were left shivering, battered, and without a way back. We stumbled through the snow, trying to find our way back to civilization. The cold bit into us, and Jake was fading fast. I had to keep him awake, keep moving. Fear and anger fueled me as we trudged through the dark. Hours later, we stumbled upon a cabin. It looked abandoned, but we had no choice. We broke in, desperate for shelter. The air inside was cold, and the place smelled musty. We found some blankets and tried to get warm. The night was endless. Every sound outside made us jump. I kept thinking about those locals, wondering if they were still out there. We had nothing left, just the bitter cold and the uncertainty of what lay ahead. Morning came, and we mustered the strength to keep going. We found a road, flagged down a passing car, and told them our story. The locals had vanished, leaving us with a haunting memory of a fishing trip turned nightmare. The police got involved, but those guys were like ghosts. No trace, no leads. It was as if they were part of the wilderness, blending in until they decided to strike. Jake and I made it back, scarred by the encounter. My girl, Lisa, and I decided to go on this romantic getaway to a frozen forest in Montana. Thought it'd be all cozy, just as surrounded by snow-covered trees. Little did we know, things were going to take a dark turn. We hiked deep into the forest, the snow crunching beneath our boots. The air was biting, but the scenery was breathtaking. We found this secluded spot, set up a tent, and lit a small fire. It was supposed to be perfect. That night, the temperature dropped, and the wind howled through the trees. We snuggled up in the tent, trying to keep warm. Around midnight, strange noises started echoing through the forest. Whispers, muffled voices. We couldn't make out what they were saying, but it made our skin crawl. Curiosity got the best of us. We grabbed our flashlights and ventured out. The forest was silent, except for the distant sounds. We followed them, stumbled upon a clearing where a group of people huddled around a makeshift camp. They looked rough, like they didn't belong there. We hid behind the trees, trying to figure out what was going on. They were exchanging packages, speaking in hushed tones. Lisa gripped my arm, fear in her eyes. We realized they were up to something illegal, dealing drugs or who knows what, right there in the freezing wilderness. We needed to get out without them noticing. But the snow betrayed us with every step. They must have heard us, 'cause suddenly they stopped talking. Panic set in. We hid behind a tree, hearts pounding, watching them scan the forest. One of them started walking toward us. We held our breath, praying they wouldn't find us. He passed by, inches away. I felt Lisa trembling beside me. Once they resumed their shady dealings, we tried sneaking away. But the snow crunched again, louder this time. They turned, flashlights sweeping the area. We booked it, sprinting through the forest like our lives depended on it. I could hear them behind us, chasing us through the freezing darkness. We reached our tent, grabbed our stuff, and kept running. The adrenaline pumped through our veins, our breath visible in the icy air. The forest became a maze, and we had no idea where we were going. All we knew was that we had to get far away from those people. Eventually, the distant sounds faded. We collapsed in the snow, panting and shivering. We didn't stop until we hit the main road, where we flagged down a passing car. We told them what happened, and they called the cops. The police went back to the forest, but those guys were long gone. They left their illegal camp behind, a chilling reminder of what we stumbled upon. Lisa and I made it out, but the forest lost its romantic charm. We decided to go snowmobiling in Yellowstone, a group of buddies looking for some winter adventure. The snow-covered landscape was breathtaking, untouched, and serene. Little did we know, it was going to turn into a night we'd never forget. We revved up our snowmobiles, tearing through the pristine snow. The cold air bit at our faces, but the thrill kept us going. As the sun dipped below the horizon, We found ourselves in this vast, isolated area. It was like we were the only people on Earth. That's when we stumbled upon another group, huddled around a campfire. They looked rough, like they'd been out there for days. We figured we'd just pass by, exchange a nod maybe. But they weren't having it. They shot us these hostile glares, sizing us up. We tried to keep it chill, not looking for trouble. We circled around, giving them a wide berth. But they stood up, started shouting. We couldn't make out the words, just the anger in their voices. Tension thickened the air, and we knew we were in for something bad. We took off, hoping to leave the aggressors behind. But they chased after us, snowmobiles roaring through the icy wilderness. Panic set in. We zigzagged through the trees, the engine roars behind us growing louder. It felt like a chase scene from some thriller movie. We tried to lose them, but they were relentless. They caught up, sideswiping us, forcing us to slow down. We were in the middle of nowhere, surrounded by these aggressive strangers. My heart pounded, and I could see the fear mirrored in my body's eyes. They cornered us, snowmobiles surrounding ours. They dismounted, glaring at us with cold eyes. They looked like trouble, like they'd snap any moment. We tried talking our way out, but it was no use. They were in no mood to reason. Things got physical. Pushing, shoving, and before we knew it, fists were flying. It was chaos in the freezing darkness. The snow beneath us turned red, and the cold air echoed with grunts and curses. We were in a fight for our lives in the unforgiving wilderness. The night became a blur of punches and adrenaline. We managed to break free, gunning our snowmobiles through the chaos. The aggressors didn't chase us this time. They stood there, watching as we disappeared into the night. We rode back to civilization, battered and bruised. I went on this ice climbing expedition in Banff, thinking it would be a solo adventure. It started off like any other climb, the crisp Canadian air biting in my face as I tackled the frozen walls. Little did I know, it was going to turn into a nightmare. The climb was tough, but I loved the challenge. As I reached higher, I noticed something odd. My usual routes were sabotaged. Safety lines cut, anchors missing. Someone was messing with my gear. Panic set in. This wasn't a game, it was a dangerous ploy. I kept climbing, trying to ignore the nagging feeling that I wasn't alone up there. The wind carried whispers of voices, distant and hostile. I reached the top, relieved to be done. But as I descended, I saw them, a rival group, glaring at me from a distance. They didn't look like friendly competitors, they looked like they wanted blood. I knew I had to be careful. The wilderness can turn deadly, and these people seemed unhinged. I kept my distance, but they followed, shadows in the icy landscape. As the sun dipped below the mountains, the cold became unbearable. I set up camp, trying to shake off the uneasy feeling. But they were there, watching from a distance. It wasn't just a climb anymore, it was a struggle for dominance in the frigid wilderness. The night was long and tense. Every creak of the ice, every distant howl of the wind, made me jump. I kept my ice axe close, not for climbing but for protection. I had no idea what these people were capable of, and the isolation made it worse. Morning came, and the rivalry intensified. They sabotaged my gear again, made it clear they wanted me out of there. I confronted them, tried to reason, but they were hostile, aggression in their eyes. The icy cliffs became a battleground, and I was caught in the middle. I pushed through the sabotage, determined to finish what I started. The climb became a perilous struggle, not just against the unforgiving ice, but against the rival group. They followed my every move, like vultures waiting for their chance. As I neared the summit, exhaustion took its toll. They closed in, and the tension peaked. It was a showdown on the icy precipice, a silent battle fought in the freezing winds. I fought with everything I had, my determination matching the biting cold. Finally, I reached the top, victorious against both the treacherous ice and the hostile rivals. But the victory was bitter. The descent was even more perilous, as they lingered, resentful and vengeful. Every step was haunted by the fear of a final attack, the icy landscape hiding their intentions. Emily and I thought a cross-country skiing trip in Vermont would be a romantic getaway. The snow-covered landscape was serene, the air biting. We hit the trails, hoping for some alone time. Little did we know, things were going to get dark real quick. As we glided through the snowy woods, we spotted a group of skiers. They looked out of place, wearing dark clothes that seemed to blend with the shadows. They didn't look like your typical outdoor enthusiasts. We decided to steer clear, not wanting any trouble. But they noticed us, and that's when things got weird. They started following, shadows in the snow. We tried to shake them off, take different trails, but they persisted. Panic set in, and we realized we were being hunted in the isolated winter terrain. We picked up our pace, but they matched it effortlessly. Emily kept looking over her shoulder, fear etched on her face. I felt a knot in my stomach, the kind that tightens when you know something's not right. The snowy woods that seemed magical turned into a maze of danger. We decided to confront them, ask why they were tailing us. But as we turned to face them, they just stared, emotionless. It sent shivers down our spines. We skied away, heartbeats echoing in the silent winter air. But they didn't give up. As the sun dipped below the trees, the woods became a chilling labyrinth. The shadows of the pursuing skiers danced around us, and we could feel the isolation closing in. Emily kept saying we should call for help, but there was no signal out there. We were on our own. We skied faster, desperation setting in. The strangers behind us seemed to multiply, a relentless force in the frigid wilderness. We took a wrong turn, and the woods became denser. Panic surged as we realized we were lost in the snowy expanse. The strangers closed in, their presence sending waves of dread. Emily and I didn't speak, we just skied, hoping for an escape. But the woods seemed to stretch endlessly, the cold becoming more biting with every passing minute. Fear hung heavy in the air. We stumbled upon a clearing, and for a moment, we thought we were safe. But the strangers surrounded us, their ski poles held like weapons. It was a standoff in the freezing silence. They didn't say a word, just stared at us with those cold eyes. The situation escalated. They demanded our belongings, our skis, everything. It wasn't just about robbery, it was about power, dominance in the desolate winter landscape. We handed over what we could, the cold air cutting through our fear. They left us stranded in the clearing, our ski tracks disappearing in the snow. We were alone, miles from civilization, with no gear in the freezing darkness. The strangers melted back into the woods, leaving us with a haunting realization. The snowy trails we thought would be our escape had become a trap, and the isolated winter terrain held a darkness we never saw coming. So, I moved to this remote cabin in the Adirondack Mountains, thinking it'd be my escape from a past that haunted me. The woods seemed like the perfect place to find solace, to forget. Little did I know, it was gonna become a living nightmare. The cabin was quaint, surrounded by trees that stretched for miles. It felt like a sanctuary at first. I thought the isolation would be a balm for my troubled soul. But soon, I noticed strange things. footprints around my cabin, distant whispers in the woods. I tried to brush it off, thinking it was just my imagination. One night, as the wind howled through the trees, I heard voices outside, hushed and sinister. I peeked through the window, and there they were, a group of people, lurking in the shadows. They didn't look like lost hikers or curious neighbors. They looked like trouble. I kept to myself, trying not to draw attention. But they were persistent. They'd watch from a distance, their eyes fixated on my cabin. Fear crept in, the solitude that was supposed to be my salvation turning into a trap. One day, as I ventured into town for supplies, I noticed them following me. The shadows in the corners of my vision. I hurried back to the cabin, heart pounding. It wasn't paranoia. They were there, a malevolent presence in the quiet mountains. As the days passed, their intentions became clearer. They wanted to exploit my isolation, use it for something sinister. I didn't know who they were or what they wanted, but I knew it wasn't good. I started locking every door and window, the creaks in the night turning into ominous warnings. Late one evening, they made their move. I heard the crunch of footsteps outside, then a knock on the door. I froze, listening. They demanded I let them in, said they knew I was alone. Panic gripped me, and I hid, praying they'd leave. But they didn't. They circled the cabin, pounding on the walls, shouting threats. It felt like the walls were closing in, the isolation turning into a cage. I clutched a kitchen knife, my only defense against the unknown. The standoff lasted for hours. I could hear their frustrated whispers, their sinister laughter. It was a game for them, and I was the prey. The cabin that once felt like a refuge became a fortress under siege. In the dead of night, they finally left. Silence settled over the woods, but my nerves were shot. I knew I couldn't stay. The next morning, I packed what little I had and left that cursed cabin behind. The shadows of the Adirondack Mountains held a darkness I couldn't escape. I never found out who they were or what they wanted. I just knew that my refuge had become a battleground, and the isolation that was meant to heal became a breeding ground for malevolent intentions. So, I went to Quebec City for this ice sculpting competition. Thought it'd be a cool way to showcase my art. The atmosphere was buzzing with excitement, the crisp winter air carrying the promise of creativity. Little did I know, it was going to turn into a chilling nightmare. The competitors were a diverse bunch, all with their visions carved out of ice. Among them was this guy, Mark. Seemed friendly at first, shared a few jokes while we were setting up our stations. But soon, I noticed something off about him. The way he looked at the ice, like it held some dark secret. As the competition started, Mark's sculpture took shape. It was an intricate human figure, but there was something about it, a twisted elegance that sent shivers down my spine. I tried to focus on my own work, but I couldn't shake the feeling that there was more to Mark's creation than met the eye. Days went by, and the sculptures grew taller and more detailed. Mark's piece, though, it seemed to come alive in a disturbing way. The human figure looked tortured, the eyes capturing a visceral pain. It was unsettling, and I couldn't figure out how he achieved that level of intensity. Nights in Quebec City were quiet, the sculptures bathed in the eerie glow of streetlights. I'd catch glimpses of Mark working on his piece even after dark, his face contorted with a strange passion. It started getting under my skin, this feeling that his creation held some malevolent energy. One night, as I was passing by his station, I overheard him muttering to the ice. It sent a chill down my spine. He spoke of bringing his creation to life, as if the sculpture held some kind of dark power. I tried to dismiss it as artistic mumbo-jumbo, but the fear lingered. The competition reached its climax, and the sculpture stood tall, illuminated in the winter night. Mark's piece, though, it looked alive, like it breathed with an unnatural energy. The judges seemed drawn to it, and I couldn't understand how they couldn't sense the darkness that emanated from it. As the results were announced, Mark's sculpture won. The crowd applauded, but I felt a sinking feeling. It wasn't just about winning, it was about the twisted energy that radiated from that piece of ice. I avoided Mark, not wanting to get entangled in whatever dark obsession consumed him. That night, as I walked back to my hotel through the quiet streets of Quebec City, I felt a presence behind me. I turned, and there was Mark, his eyes burning with a fervor that sent shivers down my spine. He spoke of his creation, how it held power beyond imagination. Fear clawed at me as he revealed his dark intentions. He wanted to use the energy trapped in the ice to bring his sculpture to life, to make it a vessel for something otherworldly. I didn't know if he was insane or if there was some twisted truth to his words. I ran, heart pounding, the cold air cutting through my panicked breaths. I couldn't shake the feeling that Mark's obsession was something beyond the realm of sanity. So, me and my girl, we thought it'd be fun to ice skate on this frozen river in Minneapolis. It was this picturesque winter day, the sun setting, and the ice gleaming. Little did we know, it was going to turn into a night we'd never forget. We laced up our skates, laughing and enjoying the crisp air. The river was wide, the ice seemingly solid. It felt like a scene from a winter postcard. As we skated, though, I noticed these shadows in the corners, lurking near the trees. I tried to shake off the unease, thinking it was just my imagination. The shadows got closer, a group of guys emerging from the dark. They looked rough, not like they were there for a leisurely skate. Panic set in, but we kept gliding, hoping they'd just pass by. They didn't. As we circled around the frozen river, their presence became more menacing. They were watching us, their eyes filled with something dark. We tried to ignore them, focusing on our skating, but the atmosphere shifted, like the cold wind carried a warning. They approached, blocking our path. We couldn't avoid them anymore. I felt this knot in my stomach, the laughter replaced by an uneasy silence. They said they wanted our money, our phones. It wasn't just a mugging, it was a calculated move to exploit the isolation of the frozen river. Fear gripped us, and we handed over what we had. But they weren't satisfied. They wanted more, our jackets, our skates. It was like they were stripping away everything, leaving us vulnerable on the cold ice. I looked at my girl, and we knew we had to comply. They left us shivering on the frozen river, taking our belongings. The wind cut through us, and the ice beneath felt like a cruel surface. We were alone, miles from help, surrounded by the chilling darkness. The winter wonderland turned into a frozen trap. As they disappeared into the shadows, we stumbled back to the shore. We were freezing, the cold biting into our bones. We tried to flag down passing cars, but the isolation worked against us. It felt like we were the only people in the world, stranded on that desolate river. Eventually, a kind soul stopped and helped us. We reported the incident to the police. So, me and my friends decided to go cross-country snowboarding in Lake Placid. We were pumped, the winter air biting as we hit the slopes. Little did we know, it was going to turn into a nightmarish showdown on the snow-covered hills. The day started great. Laughter echoed as we carved through the fresh powder. But then we noticed this other group, aggressive and competitive. They seemed to target us, challenging us to races and getting in our faces. It was weird, like they wanted trouble. We tried to avoid them, carve our own paths down the slopes, but they kept tailing us. The rivalry escalated, and the winter wonderland turned into a tense battleground. I could feel the hostility in the air, a storm brewing on the snow-covered slopes. One of their guys, Jake, was the worst. He had this chip on his shoulder, like he wanted to prove something. We didn't want any part of it, just wanted to enjoy our day on the hills. But Jake and his crew had other plans. As we took a break, they confronted us. Words turned into shouts, and the cold air echoed with the tension. It wasn't just a clash of egos, it was a chilling confrontation on the snow-covered slopes. They accused us of cutting them off, trying to ruin their day. We tried to defuse it, but Jake was relentless. The situation got physical. Pushing, shoving, and suddenly, it was an all-out brawl in the snow. I felt the cold seeping through my clothes as the adrenaline pumped through my veins. It was chaos, the slopes turning into a battleground for our sanity. Eventually, we managed to break free, skiing away from the chaos. But Jake and his crew didn't let it go. They chased us down the slopes, relentless in their pursuit. Fear gnawed us as we tried to escape their aggressive intentions. We reached the lodge, thinking we were safe. But they followed us, storming into the warmth, still spewing threats. It was like the outside cold had invaded the sanctuary of the lodge. The staff intervened, but Jake and his crew were like a winter storm, leaving chaos in their wake. We reported it to the authorities, but Jake and his crew vanished into the snowy landscape. The serene beauty of Lake Placid became tainted by the chilling memory of that confrontation. We were just this normal family, out for a skiing trip in Telluride. The slopes were breathtaking, the snow pristine. Little did we know, it was going to turn into a nightmare we'd never forget. We hit the slopes, enjoying the crisp mountain air. The day was perfect, laughter echoing as we skied down the slopes. Then, out of nowhere, this deafening roar engulfed us. The ground trembled, and we turned to see a monstrous wall of snow cascading towards us. It was an avalanche. Fear gripped us as we tried to outski the deadly rush of snow. The world turned white, and I felt the crushing force as we got swept away. It was chaos, limbs flailing in the icy torrent. Darkness closed in as the avalanche swallowed us whole. I woke up, buried in the snow. Panic set in as I realized we were trapped. It was pitch black, and the air was thin. I could hear muffled cries from my family. We were alive, but the mountain had us in its icy grip. Hours passed, and the cold seeped through our clothes. We didn't know if anyone would find us. Then, we heard distant voices. The rescue team arrived, and hope flickered in the darkness. But not all of them were there to help. As they dug through the snow, I noticed this one guy, Dan. He had this sinister look, like he had ulterior motives. I dismissed it at first, thinking maybe it was just paranoia. But as the rescue progressed, Dan's actions became more suspicious. He separated from the group, muttering to himself. I overheard him talking about our belongings, valuables hidden in the snow. It sent a chill down my spine. This was supposed to be a rescue, but Dan had other plans. It wasn't about saving lives, it was about exploiting the vulnerable. Fear gnawed at me as I watched Dan approach my family. He insisted on taking charge, guiding us to safety. But I knew his intentions were anything but altruistic. It was a perilous situation in the winter wilderness, and we were at the mercy of a man with dark motives. The rescue team, oblivious to Dan's sinister plans, continued their efforts. I weigh our options. Trust the rescue team, including Dan, or take our chances in the frozen wilderness. As they led us through the snowy terrain, I kept an eye on Dan, ready for anything. We reached a point where the path diverged, and Dan insisted on taking an isolated route. My instinct screamed danger, and I confronted him. He got defensive, aggressive even. The rescue team, unaware of the brewing tension, urged us to follow Dan. It was a critical moment. I made a split-second decision. We broke away from Dan, taking a different path. He shouted threats, but we skied through the icy landscape, desperate to escape the perilous situation. Hours later, we reached safety, exhausted and shaken. We reported Dan's suspicious behavior to the authorities. So, me and my boy decided to go ice fishing on Lake Winnipeg. It was this frozen expanse, the ice stretching for miles. Little did we know, it was going to become a night we'd wish we'd forget. We set up our gear, drilling through the ice, excited for a day of fishing. The cold air bit at our faces, but the thrill kept us going. Then this group of guys showed up, seemed friendly enough. We exchanged nods, shared a few jokes. It was gonna be a good day. As we fished, the strangers joined us, offering drinks and snacks. They seemed alright, just looking for a good time on the frozen lake. We chatted, laughed, and it felt like we were bonding over the shared cold and anticipation of a good catch. But as the sun dipped below the horizon, things started getting weird. The strangers, they weren't so friendly anymore. They started eyeing us differently, like we were trespassers in their frozen domain. I tried to shake off the unease, thinking maybe it was just the isolation getting to us. As night fell, the atmosphere turned icy. The strangers, once jovial, became menacing. They circled us, their laughter turning into whispers. My boy, sensing the shift, clutched onto my jacket. I felt this knot in my stomach, like we were in a situation spiraling out of control. They offered us a drink, but there was something off about it. I hesitated, and that's when the threats started. They made it clear we were in their territory now, and they expected us to play by their rules. Fear gripped us as the isolation of the frozen lake turned into a trap. We tried to pack up and leave, but they blocked our path. The strangers, now hostile, demanded our gear, our catch, everything. It wasn't just a friendly encounter gone wrong, it was a confrontation in the freezing darkness. I tried to reason with them, but reason had left the ice along with the fading daylight. Tensions escalated. Shouts turned into shoves, and suddenly, it was chaos on the frozen lake. My boy, scared out of his mind, clung to me as we fought against the strangers. The ice beneath us became a battleground, the cold air echoing with the sounds of a struggle. We managed to break free, stumbling through the frozen expanse. But they chased us, their threats cutting through the icy wind. Panic set in as we realized we were alone, pursued by the menacing strangers in the vast darkness. We reached the shore, breathless and battered. But the danger wasn't over. The strangers lingered, shadows in the frozen night. We ran, leaving the isolated lake behind, haunted by the chilling encounter. What was supposed to be a day of bonding and fishing turned into a nightmare on the icy expanse of Lake Winnipeg. Me and my partner, we were on this road trip in our RV, cruising through the snowy landscapes near Anchorage, Alaska. The beauty of the frozen wilderness was breathtaking, but little did we know, it was going to turn into a night we'd wish we could erase. The snow started falling heavily, and the road became treacherous. We got stranded, the RV stuck in a white blanket of snow. Panic set in as the cold wind howled, and the isolation of the wilderness felt suffocating. We needed shelter, and fast. We stumbled upon this lodge, seemingly abandoned, nestled in the snow-covered trees. It was like a beacon of hope in the frozen darkness. We cautiously approached, the cold gnawing at us, and pushed the creaky door open. The warmth inside was a welcome embrace, and the flickering lights hinted at a refuge. But as we explored, the lodge felt off. The air was heavy, and the silence held a strange tension. We found old furniture, covered in dust, and traces of a life left behind in a hurry. It was like time had frozen in this place. As we settled in, the unease grew. Every creak of the floorboards, every distant sound, made us jump. The lodge seemed to echo with secrets, and the isolation outside became mirrored within the walls. I tried to dismiss it, thinking it was just the eerie atmosphere of an old building. Night fell, and the lodge took on a more sinister vibe. Shadows danced on the walls, and the wind outside howled like a chorus of forgotten souls. We decided to stay in one of the rooms, the cold seeping through the thin walls. Sleep was elusive, the unknown history of the lodge lingering in our minds. At some point, I heard faint whispers. It was like distant conversations, echoing through the empty halls. We went to investigate, thinking maybe we weren't alone. The whispers led us to a locked door, and curiosity got the better of us. We forced the door open, and what we found turned our blood cold. It was a hidden room, filled with old photographs and newspaper clippings. The images showed people, seemingly happy, but their eyes held a darkness. The clippings spoke of disappearances, strange occurrences, and a mystery that had never been solved. As we delved deeper, the lodge's sinister secret unfolded. The people in the photographs were the former inhabitants, trapped in a web of tragedy and despair. The whispers became more pronounced, the voices of those long gone, still haunting the lodge. Fear clawed at us as we realized the lodge was a graveyard of memories, a place where the past lingered like a ghost. The storm outside raged on, matching the turmoil within the walls. We tried to leave, but the door wouldn't budge, trapping us in a nightmare. The whispers turned into desperate cries, voices pleading for release. Shadows moved, dancing with the agony of forgotten souls. We were prisoners in a lodge that held a sinister secret, a place where the past clung to the present like a curse. As dawn broke, the storm outside subsided, and the lodge felt emptier. We managed to force the door open, escaping the haunting memories that clung to the walls. The frozen wilderness outside seemed more welcoming than the lodge's hidden horrors. We drove away, leaving the lodge behind, but its sinister secret stayed with us. I'm this guy who loves adventure, right? So, I decide to go ice climbing in Jasper, Canada. The frozen cliffs, the crisp air, it seemed like the perfect challenge. But what started as an adrenaline-fueled escapade turned into a nightmarish ordeal. I hit the ice with my gear, ready for the climb. Jasper was this breathtaking wilderness, and the frozen formations looked like nature's masterpiece. As I began scaling the icy heights, I noticed something off. The roots were messed up, like someone had deliberately sabotaged them. I shrugged it off at first, thinking maybe it was just the unpredictable nature of the frozen terrain. But as I climbed higher, the sabotage became more apparent. The ice picks couldn't find a grip, and the footholds were precarious at best. It was like someone wanted to turn my adventure into a death trap. I pressed on, determined to conquer the challenge. But then, I spotted them, a rival group of climbers, smirking from a distance. It wasn't just about nature being tricky, they were deliberately making it harder for me. The tension on the icy cliffs grew thicker than the freezing air. As night fell, the temperature plummeted, and the wind howled through the frozen peaks. I knew I had to confront the rival climbers, figure out what their deal was. It wasn't just about the climb anymore, it was about survival on the frozen cliffs. I approached them, asking why they were sabotaging the routes. They laughed it off, claiming it was all part of the thrill. But their eyes told a different story, a dark intention that sent shivers down my spine. It wasn't a friendly rivalry, it was a dangerous game they were playing. The confrontation escalated. Words turned into threats, and suddenly, it was a chilling showdown on the icy heights. They accused me of invading their territory, but this was Jasper, the gray outdoors meant for everyone. The frozen cliffs became a battlefield for egos, and I found myself in the middle of it. I tried reasoning with them, explaining that we could share the climbs, enjoy the challenge together. But they weren't having it. Their hostility escalated, and the night on the icy peaks turned into a fight for survival. I knew I had to get out of there. I climbed down as fast as I could, the frozen wind biting into my bones. They pursued, their shouts echoing in the frozen night. Fear gripped me as I descended, the sabotage turning the adventure into a perilous escape. The frozen cliffs, once a majestic playground, became a haunting battleground. I reached the base, breathless and battered. I reported the incident to the authorities, but the rival climbers vanished into the frozen wilderness. We decided to take this dog sled tour in Fairbanks, Alaska. Seemed like a cool way to experience the winter wilderness. Little did we know, it was going to turn into a bone-chilling nightmare. The guide, this rugged-looking guy, seemed legit at first. He had this team of huskies ready to go, and the snowy landscape stretched for miles. We bundled up, excited for the adventure. But as we started sledding, things took a dark turn. The guide, he kept steering us deeper into the wilderness, away from the marked trails. I thought maybe it was just a different route, but the unease settled in. The wind howled, and the cold bit into us as the sled glided over the frozen terrain. It felt like the wilderness was closing in on us. As we ventured further, the guide's behavior became erratic. He kept muttering to himself, glancing around like he was paranoid. I tried to ask him about the route, but he brushed off the questions, eyes darting nervously. The sun began to set, casting long shadows on the snow. That's when the guide admitted we were lost. Panic set in, but he assured us he knew a shortcut back. It felt wrong, but we didn't have much choice. The wilderness stretched out in all directions, and the cold was relentless. As we followed the guide, the snowfall got heavier. Visibility dropped, and the sled moved slower through the thickening snow. I could sense something wasn't right. The guide's shortcut felt like a desperate attempt to mask the fact that he had no idea where we were. Then, he stopped abruptly. Said he needed to check something with the sled. It was weird, but we waited, the dogs restless in the silence. That's when I saw him, the guide pulling out a map, tracing routes that didn't make any sense. The realization hit me like a punch to the gut. He was leading us off course on purpose, into the frozen wilderness, away from any chance of rescue. I confronted him, demanding an explanation. His eyes met mine, and I saw a darkness that sent shivers down my spine. He admitted it, he wanted us lost in the snow, at his mercy. Fear gripped us as we realized our lives were at the mercy of this sinister guide. He had a plan, and it involved leaving us stranded in the unforgiving winter wilderness. The cold became more biting, the snowfall more suffocating. We were at the mercy of a man with a twisted agenda. Desperation set in. We decided to ditch the sled, take our chances on foot. The guide protested, shouted threats, but we didn't care. We trudged through the knee-deep snow, our breath visible in the frozen air. The guide followed, his intentions becoming more sinister with each step. Hours passed, the darkness of the wilderness swallowing us whole. The cold was relentless, and the guide's threats turned into desperate pleas. He didn't know the way back, and he needed us to survive. It was a sick game he was playing, leading us deeper into the frozen abyss. But we weren't falling for it. We trudged on, determined to escape his sinister plan. The howling wind carried his desperate cries behind us. It was a nightmarish struggle for survival in the frozen wilderness, the huskies trailing behind, sensing the tension in the air. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, we stumbled upon a marked trail. The guide's plan had failed, and we were on the path to safety. We reported him to the authorities, and they found him lost in the snow, still playing the victim. So, there I was, this guy who loved hiking, exploring the backcountry of Lake Louise in Canada. The snow-covered landscape, the isolation, it all seemed like the perfect adventure. Little did I know, it was going to turn into a fight for survival. I ventured deep into the wilderness, the snow crunching beneath my boots. The air was crisp, and the trees stood like sentinels in the frozen landscape. It was serene, peaceful. But that calm was just a cover for what was about to unfold. As I trudged through the snow, I stumbled upon a group of people. Seemed harmless at first, just like fellow hikers enjoying the beauty of the backcountry. We exchanged nods, and I thought maybe we'd share the trail for a bit. But as we walked, the group's vibe turned dark. They started eyeing me differently, their whispers carried by the biting wind. I felt this tension building, a sense that something was off. I tried to shake it off, thinking maybe it was just my imagination playing tricks. Night fell fast, the cold creeping in. I decided to set up camp, thinking the group would pass by. But they didn't. They circled my campsite, their shadows dancing in the glow of my small fire. I tried to ignore them, focus on my own business, but the unease settled in like a heavy snowfall. Then, they approached, demanding my supplies. I was outnumbered, the isolation turning into a trap. I tried to reason with them, but they weren't having it. Their intentions were clear. They wanted what I had, and they didn't care about my well-being. The confrontation turned physical. Shouts echoed in the snowy silence as we grappled in the cold night. It was a fight for survival, the snow-covered terrain becoming a battlefield. I felt the adrenaline pumping, the cold seeping through my clothes as I fought to protect what was mine. I managed to break free, fleeing into the frozen wilderness. But they pursued, their threats cutting through the biting wind. Panic set in as I realized I was alone, chased by a group with dangerous intentions in the isolated backcountry. I navigated through the snow-covered landscape, desperate to escape. The trees loomed like ominous figures in the darkness, and every crunch of footsteps behind me fueled my fear. The cold became my enemy, biting at my exposed skin as I ran for my life. Hours passed, the pursuit relentless. I stumbled, exhausted, the frozen air burning in my lungs. But I couldn't stop. I knew if they caught me, it was game over. The snowy terrain seemed endless, and the isolation that once felt peaceful now felt suffocating. Finally, I reached a frozen river, its icy surface stretching like a path to potential safety. I followed it, hoping the frozen expanse would deter my pursuers. The cold seeped through my boots, and the wind howled like a relentless foe. The adrenaline was the only thing keeping me going. Eventually, I stumbled upon a ranger station, a welcome sight in the desolate winter night. I reported the encounter, and the authorities launched a search for the dangerous group. They vanished into the frozen wilderness, leaving behind a chilling memory of survival in the backcountry of Lake Louise. The adventure I sought turned into a fight for my life. So, me and my buddies, we decided to go snowboarding in Park City, Utah. The slopes were calling, and we were pumped for some winter fun. But what started as a chill day on the mountain turned into a battle for dominance. We hit the slopes, the cold air biting at our faces. The snow was fresh, the thrill real. But then, we crossed paths with this rival group. They had this aggressive vibe, like they owned the mountain. We tried to steer clear, keep to our own runs, but they weren't having it. As we navigated down the slopes, the rival group followed, getting closer with every turn. It felt like a territorial dispute over the snow-covered terrain. I tried to shake off the tension, thinking maybe it was just a clash of egos on the mountain. But as we took a break, things escalated. Words turned into threats, and suddenly, it was a confrontation in the snowy expanse. The chill air echoed with shouts and the aggressive energy of the rival group. It wasn't about sharing the mountain anymore. It was about dominance, about who owned the slopes. They challenged us, dared us to prove ourselves on the snow. It was like a showdown in a frozen arena, and the mountain became a battleground for our rivalry. The friendly slopes transformed into a tense arena where every turn was a statement of dominance. We tried to outboard them, show them we weren't backing down. But they were relentless, shadows on our heels in the winter sun. The tension built with every jump, every twist in the icy air. It wasn't just about snowboarding anymore, it was about survival on the slopes. Then, one of them got too close, purposely trying to cut me off. It became personal, a fight for control of the mountain. The adrenaline kicked in, and suddenly, the snow-covered landscape became a chaotic arena of aggressive maneuvers and daring stunts. We clashed, boards cutting through the snow, the winter air thick with rivalry. It was like a game of dominance, each jump and turn a move in the battle for control. The cold became an afterthought as the rivalry took center stage. As we neared the end of the run, the tension reached its peak. It was a close call, but we managed to outmaneuver the rival group. Cheers erupted as we left them behind, the mountain's victory ours for the taking. But the satisfaction was short-lived. As we gathered at the base, the rival group glared at us, their aggressive tendencies still evident. It wasn't just a day of snowboarding, it was a clash of egos that lingered in the frosty air. The mountain, once a place for winter fun, became a battleground where dominance was the ultimate prize. So, there I am, decided to check out this winter carnival in Quebec City, Canada. The place was buzzing with festivity, the colorful lights and cheerful music making it seem like the perfect escape from the winter chill. But little did I know, things were about to take a dark turn. I wandered through the carnival, the lively atmosphere contagious. The air was filled with laughter and the scent of hot cocoa, and I thought it was just going to be a fun night. But as I strolled deeper into the festivities, I noticed something off. There was this hidden corner, away from the main attractions, where the mood changed. The festive cheer gave way to hushed conversations and mysterious glances. It was like stumbling upon a hidden world beneath the colorful exterior. Curiosity got the better of me, and I ventured into the obscure part of the carnival. That's when I noticed a group of people, clad in dark clothes, engaged in some kind of ritual. It felt like I had stumbled upon a secret society, hidden beneath the facade of the winter celebration. As I observed, the atmosphere turned ominous. The people in the group seemed to sense my presence, their eyes locking onto mine. Fear crept in, and I tried to blend in, pretending to be just another carnival goer. But the hidden world beneath the festivities felt like a maze, and I was caught in its tangled web. I followed the group discreetly, my heart pounding with each step. They led me to an old, abandoned building on the outskirts of the carnival. The festive music faded, replaced by an eerie silence. I hesitated, but curiosity pushed me forward, deeper into the unknown. Inside, the hidden world revealed itself. The group was involved in some kind of ritualistic ceremony, candles flickering in the dimly lit space. Symbols adorned the walls, and the air was heavy with a sense of foreboding. I realized I had stumbled upon something beyond the festive facade, a dark underbelly hidden in plain sight. Suddenly, one of them noticed me. Panic set in, and I turned to flee, but the entrance had vanished. The festive music that once echoed through the carnival now felt like a distant memory. The hidden world beneath had me trapped, entangled in a series of ominous events. The group surrounded me, their expressions unreadable. Fear gripped me as they began chanting, the ritual taking a dark turn. I tried to reason with them, plead for my freedom, but their eyes held a darkness that sent shivers down my spine. As the ritual intensified, the building seemed to pulsate with an otherworldly energy. Shadows danced on the walls, and the symbols seemed to come alive. It was like being trapped in a nightmare, the festive carnival replaced by a chilling spectacle of the unknown. I closed my eyes, hoping it was just a bad dream, but when I opened them again, the hidden world had me in its clutches. The ritual reached its climax, and the air crackled with an unsettling energy. I felt a force pulling at me, as if the carnival itself had turned into a malevolent entity. Then, suddenly, everything stopped. The chanting ceased, and the symbols on the walls faded away. The group dispersed, leaving me alone in the abandoned building. The festive music returned, but it sounded different, tainted by the ominous events I had witnessed. I stumbled out of the hidden world, the carnival now a surreal and twisted place. The winter chill felt more biting, and the cheerful atmosphere seemed like a facade. I reported the eerie encounter to the authorities, but the hidden world beneath the winter carnival haunted me. The festive celebration that drew me in had transformed into a nightmarish ordeal, a reminder that even in the midst of joyous occasions, there could be a hidden world lurking in the shadows. The winter carnival, once a symbol of merriment, became a chilling memory of an encounter with the unknown. So, there we were, this family all excited about exploring Yellowstone National Park on snowmobiles. The snow-covered landscape seemed like the perfect winter getaway. Little did we know, it was going to turn into a nightmarish encounter in the frozen wilderness. We revved up our snowmobiles, the chill air hitting our faces as we ventured deeper into the park. The snow-covered trees stood like silent sentinels, and the excitement was palpable. But as we raced through the frozen expanse, we stumbled upon this menacing gang. They were a group of rough-looking individuals, their cold stares sending shivers down our spines. I tried to steer clear, thinking maybe they were just other visitors enjoying the winter park. But the tension in the air was thick, like an impending storm about to break loose. As we continued our snowmobile adventure, the gang started tailing us. It was like they had targeted us, and the winter landscape turned into a battleground. Fear gripped us as their snowmobiles closed in, their aggressive presence turning our vacation into a chilling encounter. I tried to ignore them, focus on the beauty of Yellowstone, but their menacing shadows loomed behind us. The park that was supposed to be a haven for winter fun now felt like a trap in the frozen wilderness. The cold became more biting, and the thrill of snowmobiling turned into a desperate attempt to escape the gang. We raced through the snow-covered trails, the gang relentless in their pursuit. Panic set in as we realized we were at their mercy in the isolated winter landscape. The trees blurred as we sped, the frozen air cutting through our clothes. It was like a nightmare unfolding in the vast expanse of Yellowstone. As we reached a more open area, the gang caught up with us. They surrounded our family, their snowmobiles forming a menacing circle. The leader, a tall and imposing figure, approached with a sinister grin. It was clear they had something else in mind for our winter vacation. They demanded our belongings, threatening us with their cold gazes. The isolation of the snowy wilderness became more pronounced as they loomed over us. We handed over our valuables, hoping it would be enough to make them leave. But they weren't satisfied. The leader, fueled by some dark intention, started taunting us. He wanted more than just our possessions. He wanted to instill fear. The frozen air echoed with their laughter as they circled us like vultures in the winter wilderness. Our family vacation had turned into a nightmare, and escape seemed impossible. Then, things took a darker turn. They forced us off our snowmobiles, leaving us stranded in the freezing cold. The gang disappeared into the snowy expanse, taking our winter gear with them. The realization hit us like a punch to the gut. We were left alone, helpless in the unforgiving winter wilderness. We huddled together for warmth, the freezing air seeping into our bones. The snow-covered landscape that once seemed serene now felt like a prison. Our cries for help echoed in the vast emptiness of Yellowstone, unanswered in the desolate winter night. Hours passed, and the temperature plummeted. We were on the verge of hypothermia, clinging to each other for warmth. The snowy wilderness that had drawn us and now threatened to be our demise. The gang had vanished into the frozen abyss, leaving us to face the chilling reality of survival. Finally, a park ranger stumbled upon our freezing family. The rescue team arrived, their words of comfort cutting through the biting wind. They wrapped us in warm blankets, but the nightmare of the gang's encounter lingered like a haunting shadow. So, I'm this guy who loves solo adventures, and I thought joining a snowshoeing group in Lake Louise, Canada, would be a cool way to meet people. Winter, snow-covered landscapes seemed like a dream. But that dream was about to turn into a bone-chilling nightmare. The group seemed normal at first, just people gathered for a winter excursion. We strapped on our snowshoes, the crisp air hitting our faces. I was excited, thinking it would be a fun day exploring the snowy wilderness. Little did I know, the other participants had something darker in mind. As we trudged through the snow-covered trails, I noticed strange glances and hushed conversations among the group. It felt like they had some hidden agenda, and the festive winter landscape became a backdrop to their ominous intentions. I tried to shake off the unease, thinking maybe I was just being paranoid. But as we ventured deeper into the frozen expanse, things took a turn. The group started deviating from the marked trails, leading us into a more isolated area. I questioned the change, but they brushed it off, claiming it was a shortcut to a scenic spot. The winter wilderness, once inviting, now felt like a trap closing in on me. The unease grew, and I realized I was alone in a group with unknown intentions. The snowy landscape, so peaceful at first, seemed to harbor a hidden danger. I decided to keep my guard up, aware that something was off about this seemingly innocent snowshoeing excursion. As we reached a more secluded part of the trail, the group's behavior became more unsettling. Whispers turned into outright threats, and it became clear they had a sinister plan. Fear gripped me as I realized I had walked into a situation I couldn't control. The snowy landscape, once a winter wonderland, became a stage for a chilling confrontation. I tried to distance myself from the group, but they closed in, their intentions becoming more apparent. It was like a nightmare unfolding in the freezing cold. The snowshoes that were supposed to carry me through a winter adventure now felt like shackles, trapping me in a hostile situation. As the confrontation escalated, I realized I had to make a move. I broke away from the group, running through the snow-covered trees. The cold air burned my lungs, and the fear of the unknown fueled my adrenaline. It was a desperate attempt to escape the chilling situation. The group pursued, their threats cutting through the biting wind. The winter landscape, once serene, turned into a chaotic battleground. I navigated through the snow-covered terrain, the trees offering me fleeting moments of cover. The isolation of Lake Louise became both a refuge and a curse. Hours passed, and I managed to find my way back to the marked trails. The group had given up the pursuit, but the fear lingered. I reported the chilling encounter to the authorities, but the mystery of the group with dark intentions haunted me. The snowy wilderness, once a symbol of adventure, now held a sinister secret. The solo snowshoeing excursion that started with excitement turned into a harrowing tale. The frozen landscape, once an inviting playground, became a chilling reminder that human intentions can turn a winter adventure into a confrontation with darkness. Alright, so there I was, thinking ice skating on a frozen river in Minneapolis would be a great idea. The ice seemed solid, the winter air crisp. Little did I know, this was going to turn into one heck of a perilous ordeal. I laced up my skates, gliding on the frozen river with the winter sun casting long shadows. It felt serene, the chill biting at my cheeks. But then, out of nowhere, this group of locals appeared. They didn't seem too thrilled about me being there, but I brushed it off, thinking they were just territorial about their icy turf. As I skated along, their glares followed me, turning the once serene atmosphere into a tense one. I tried to enjoy the winter outing, but their presence was like an unwelcome shadow on the ice. It became clear they weren't just minding their own business. I decided to skate away, thinking it would defuse the situation. But they pursued, their skates cutting through the frozen surface with an eerie sound. It was like a winter chase, the icy wind carrying their distant taunts. The river, once a winter playground, now felt like a frozen battleground. I picked up my pace, the ice cracking beneath me as I tried to escape their pursuit. Panic set in when I realized I was being herded into a more secluded part of the frozen river. The winter outing that started with a sense of freedom now felt like a trap closing in. As I reached a more isolated stretch, the group surrounded me. Their menacing stares and icy glares made it clear this confrontation was no accident. It was like I had stumbled into a territory dispute on the icy frontier of Minneapolis. Words were exchanged, and the tension grew. I tried to reason with them, explain I was just here for a bit of winter fun. But they weren't having it. The frozen river became a stage for a chilling confrontation, and the icy surface felt more treacherous beneath my skates. The leader of the group stepped forward, his breath visible in the freezing air. He made it clear they didn't want outsiders on their turf. It wasn't just about a friendly game of ice skating, it was a territorial clash on the frozen frontier of Minneapolis. Things escalated, and before I knew it, it turned physical. The frozen river became a battleground for a fight I never saw coming. I tried to hold my own, slipping and sliding on the ice as blows were exchanged. The winter air echoed with the sounds of the confrontation, the chill settling into my bones. I managed to break free, skating away from the group. But they weren't done. They pursued relentlessly, their anger driving them forward. It was a desperate attempt to escape this unexpected danger on the icy expanse. As I skated for my life, the distant lights of Minneapolis seemed like a distant beacon of safety. The icy surface beneath me became both an ally and a threat. I navigated the frozen river, the echoes of the confrontation fading into the winter night. Finally, I reached the edge of the river, the group still in the distance. I reported the terrifying encounter to the authorities, but the icy ordeal stayed with me. The winter outing that started with innocent fun became a harrowing tale of a confrontation on the frozen frontier of Minneapolis. The frozen river, once a symbol of winter joy, now held the memory of a perilous encounter. So, me and my friends decided to rent this cabin in Whistler, Canada, for a winter vacation. It seemed like the perfect getaway, snowy landscapes, cozy vibes. But man, little did we know what we were walking into. The cabin looked charming from the outside, nestled in the snow-covered woods. We were all excited, thinking it was going to be the ultimate winter escape. The air was cold, and the anticipation hung thick as we entered. It was supposed to be idyllic, right? But as we settled in, things started feeling off. At first, it was subtle. Weird creaks in the middle of the night, shadows moving where they shouldn't. We brushed it off, thinking it was just an old cabin settling into the winter chill. But then, things got downright eerie. One evening, we found this hidden door in the back of a closet. It led to this basement we didn't know existed. The air down there was stale, and the atmosphere felt heavy. It was like the cabin had secrets it didn't want us to know. Curiosity got the better of us, and we explored the basement. That's when we stumbled upon this old, dusty journal. It was filled with unsettling stories, tales of previous occupants who experienced strange occurrences in the cabin. It was like a warning we should have paid attention to. The journal hinted at something darker, like the cabin had a history we weren't aware of. But, we're just a bunch of friends looking for a good time, so we kind of laughed it off. That turned out to be a mistake. As the nights went on, the atmosphere in the cabin got more oppressive. Strange noises echoed through the halls, and the shadows seemed to move on their own. It felt like the cabin was alive with some malevolent energy. The winter wonderland we expected turned into a claustrophobic nightmare. One night, we decided to play it cool, just have some drinks and enjoy the snowy scenery. But then, we heard these distant whispers. Low, guttural voices that sent shivers down our spines. We thought maybe it was just the wind, but there was something unnatural about those whispers. Suddenly, the temperature dropped. I mean, drastically. It was like the cabin itself was rebelling against our presence. We huddled together, trying to make sense of the chilling atmosphere. That's when the shadows in the corners started to take shape. I kid you not, figures emerged from the darkness. Silent, menacing shapes that seemed to watch us. Panic set in as we realized we weren't alone in that cabin. The winter vacation we envisioned turned into a nightmarish encounter with the unknown. We tried to leave, but the cabin seemed to trap us. The doors wouldn't budge, the windows were sealed shut. It was like the walls themselves were closing in on us. Fear took hold as we felt the oppressive energy suffocating us. Then, the figures in the shadows started moving closer. Their eyes gleamed with an otherworldly light. We were paralyzed with terror, unable to escape the unfolding nightmare. The cozy cabin had turned into a sinister trap. One by one, the figures approached us, their presence sending waves of dread. We were trapped in that hellish moment, the winter chill outside a stark contrast to the rising temperature of our fear. The once charming cabin now held us captive in its dark secret. As the figures closed in, we heard those whispers again. This time, they were more audible, a symphony of malevolent voices. It felt like the cabin itself was alive with some ancient, malevolent force. Our screams echoed in the confined space, unanswered by the unforgiving silence of the cabin. Then, just as suddenly as it all began, the figures retreated into the shadows. The oppressive energy lifted, and the temperature normalized. We stumbled out of that cabin, shaken to our core. The snowy landscape outside seemed like a sanctuary compared to the horrors we experienced inside. We reported the encounter to the authorities, but the cabin stood silent, its secrets buried in the snowy woods of Whistler. The winter vacation we hoped for turned into a chilling tale of a cabin with a dark and dangerous secret. The cozy facade shattered, leaving us haunted by the winter nightmare we never saw coming.